The movie begins with a man meticulously collecting weapons, guns, and various tools, each item chosen with a clear purpose, hinting at the serious and possibly dangerous mission he is about to undertake. The scene then shifts to a bustling nightclub, where bright lights flash and music pumps. Among the lively crowd is a man named Sully, who is the owner of the club, attempting to immerse himself in the energetic atmosphere. Despite the lively surroundings, Sully struggles to enjoy the moment and decides to leave the club early. However, just as he steps outside, his night takes a chilling turn, is unexpectedly kidnapped by a shadowy figure whose motives remain unclear. Across Los Angeles, 9 strangers are abducted at random, each caught off guard in the middle of their daily lives. The kidnapper, a mysterious figure wearing a mask to conceal his identity, strikes with precision, leaving no trace of who he might be. As the shocking news of the abduction spreads, the city buzzes with fear and speculation. While the 9 captives are transported to an unknown location, the strangers find themselves bound and silenced, their hands locked in handcuffs, mouths covered with tape, and heads concealed under dark fabric. Eventually, the masked kidnapper steps into the room, his calm demeanor only adding to the unease. He removes the black coverings from their heads and peels away the tape from their mouths. Breaking the silence, he explains the twisted game they have been unwillingly dragged into. With an unsettling clarity, he outlines the rules that the 9 of them must work together to uncover the reason they have been chosen and brought to this place. The rules of the game are brutally simple and unforgiving. Each victim is given exactly 10 minutes to figure out the connection that links them all together. If they fail to uncover the truth by the time the countdown ends, the kidnapper will kill one of them. After each death, the timer resets, and the process begins again. The masked abductor's voice remains calm, as he makes a chilling promise that if they manage to solve the mystery, he will set them free and confess to all his crimes. Despite being thrust together in this horrifying ordeal, the group of 9 couldn't be more different. Each of them comes from a distinct background, with unique personalities, appearances, and professions that seem to have no obvious link. Before leaving the room, the kidnapper tosses a handful of chalk pieces onto the floor, his voice calm yet cryptic as he suggests the victims use them to write on the walls as a means of communication. To the terrified group, this gesture feels like a cruel joke, a manipulative ploy designed to further confuse and torment them. They hesitate, their mistrust of one another growing as they dismiss the gesture as another part of the abductor's twisted game. Some cling to the desperate hope that this is all an elaborate hoax, convincing themselves the danger isn't real, even as the reality of their situation looms ominously. As the minutes tick by, the atmosphere in the room grows heavier. Suspicion flares, and the victims' guarded glances reveal that none of them trusts the others. Yet, with the shadow of death hanging over them, they are forced to confront their own fears and open up. Piece by piece, they begin sharing fragments of their pasts, hesitant at first but increasingly desperate to uncover the elusive connection that binds them together. Tensions rise among the victims as Coogan clashes with Jackson and Sully, who dislike his attitude. Later, Eddie steps forward, introduces himself to the group, and writes his name on the wall. He offers to help, but Jackson quickly shuts him down. After that, Jackson introduces himself and adds his name to the wall. Kelly follows, explaining that she's an assistant district attorney from Los Angeles. Concerned, Eddie asks if she might have upset any of her clients enough to provoke revenge. Kelly admits she has plenty of enemies, but insists none of them would go to such extremes. Christian tells Sully he remembers him and brings up a business deal they had years ago. Father Francis curiously asks about the nature of their deal, but Christian deflects, saying it was so long ago that the details don't matter. Later, Christian admits the connection between them. Sully had once lent him money. He quickly clarifies that he paid Sully back and shares that he ended up in prison for 3 years after trying to sell drugs to undercover cops. Christian then explains he's now working as both a bartender and an actor. During this, Father Francis introduces himself and mentions that he runs a Catholic parish in the San Fernando Valley. As this happens, Sully makes fun of Leon, prompting Leon to try and kick him, though he fails to reach. Coogan steps in, pointing out they've forgotten someone, gesturing toward Nung Cham. Father Francis then asks her if she speaks English. Meanwhile, Nung Cham attempted to contribute something about herself, but her words fell on deaf ears. As a Chinese woman in a room full of English speakers, the language barrier left her isolated. Her efforts to communicate met with blank stares and frustrated shrugs. She felt an acute sense of alienation, her voice lost amid the growing chaos. Her inability to connect only deepened the divide within the group, fueling misunderstandings and sparking new tensions. Jackson says their situation has nothing to do with the police and tells them he's a cop. Leon, annoyed, says he already suspected it. Jackson tries to explain he's a good cop, but Leon cuts him off, saying there are no good cops where he comes from. Coogan jumps in, joking that it's been nice spending his last 10 minutes with them. Kelly tries to ask Leon something, but instead of answering, Leon snaps at her and insults both Sully and Kelly. When the 10-minute countdown reaches 0, the tension in the room exploded into raw fear. The kidnapper re-entered, his masked presence silencing the group instantly. Without hesitation, he carried out his grim promise, selecting one of the victims for execution. He approached Christianier, his movements deliberate, and leaned in close, whispering the correct answer to the question they had failed to solve. Christianier's eyes widened in shock and terror as he grasped the truth. Desperately, he begged for mercy, his pleas echoing in the room, but the kidnapper remained cold and unmoved. The sound of the gunshot shattered the air, leaving the group paralyzed with horror. Christianier's lifeless body slumped to the floor as the kidnapper calmly reset the timer. The 10 minutes started anew, but the dread in the room was now palpable, an oppressive force pressing down on those who remained. Without a word, the kidnapper turned and exited the room, leaving the survivors to confront the devastating reality of their situation and the growing fear that they might be next. The group slowly begins to accept the harsh reality that it is no prank or elaborate hoax, but a horrifying truth. Their survival depends on unraveling the connection that binds them all together. One by one, they begin to open up, forced to confront their darkest secrets in a desperate attempt to uncover the truth. Coogan admits to committing grand theft fraud, a crime that landed him in prison for 5 years. His admission adds another layer to his already troubled past. Leon, after much hesitation, confesses to running an illegal weapons supply business, a dangerous trade that has left him with more enemies than friends. Eddie, a polished professional, reveals his involvement in the healthcare industry, where his company conducts experimental drug tests. His guilt deepens as he shares a personal moral failing, altering his brother's medical records to secure him free treatment, a choice that weighs heavily on his conscience. Eddie insists that he doesn't belong in this situation, explaining that he's never done anything wrong to deserve it. Afterward, tensions rise further when Kelly admits to having an affair with Jackson. The revelation of their infidelity paints a picture of betrayal, one that led to Jackson's wife discovering the truth and filing for divorce. The group's secrets, once hidden, now lie exposed, weaving a tapestry of deceit, guilt, and mistakes. Meanwhile, Leon's desperation drives him to an extreme measure. By deliberately injuring his own hand with the help of Sully, he manages to free himself from the handcuffs. His liberation brings no relief to the others, as instead of helping them, he seizes the chance to escape. Panic fuels his actions as he dashes for the door, hoping to outrun the nightmare he's trapped in. However, his attempt is short-lived. The kidnapper intercepts him effortlessly, his voice calm yet menacing as he drags Leon back into the room. Then the kidnapper reveals that it has been 2 years since he planned to catch them, his words dripping with cold intent. Leon struggles, but the kidnapper's grip remains unyielding. The failed escape attempt leaves the group even more shaken, the weight of their situation now undeniable. The chilling efficiency of their captor reinforces a single, terrifying truth that there is no easy way out. As the timer runs out, the atmosphere in the room turns suffocating with dread. The kidnapper returns, his presence instantly silencing any last-minute theories or pleas. Without hesitation, he approaches Coogan, delivering the devastating reason for the group's gathering just moments before pulling the trigger. The sound of the gunshot echoes through the room, leaving the remaining victims paralyzed with fear and grief. Before exiting, the kidnapper casts a chilling promise. Leon will be his next target. With only 7 survivors left, the group is forced to confront a grim reality. Eddie, overwhelmed and confused by the situation, turns to Father Francis for help. However, Father Francis, being just as helpless, admits he can't do anything either. Meanwhile, Leon, despite being injured, laughs and declares he'll die a happy man. Frustrated, Sully throws his shoe at him in anger. Afterward, Nung Cham locks eyes with Kelly, speaking rapidly in Chinese in an effort to communicate. Though the language barrier remains, something in Cham's words sparks a flicker of recognition in Kelly's eyes. Straining her memory, Kelly suddenly recalls a connection from her past. She once served as Cham's lawyer. The realization sends a ripple of unease through the group as Kelly recounts the story. 2 years earlier, Cham's store had been robbed. In her zeal to win the case, Kelly had falsely accused a man named Wade of committing the crime. This accusation led to Wade's conviction, a mistake Kelly had buried in the recesses of her memory, but could no longer deny. As the group processes this revelation, the room erupts with speculation. Then, they begin to question if Wade's grudge might extend beyond Kelly, tying their own past actions to his suffering. With the timer counting down again, the group knows they must act quickly. The truth, whatever it may be, feels closer yet more dangerous with each passing second. The tension in the room reaches a breaking point as Leon finally reveals a horrifying truth. Years ago, In an act of greed and desperation, he killed his own brother for financial gain. He coldly disposed of the body, and later sold the weapon to erase any trace of his crime. The group is left in stunned silence, the weight of Leon's confession pressing down on them. Before they can fully process the magnitude of his actions, the relentless timer once again hits 0. The kidnapper enters the room without a word, his presence as chilling as ever. True to his earlier promise, he kills Leon swiftly, leaving no time for pleas. The remaining 6 watch in horror as the kidnapper resets the timer and departs, the oppressive sense of dread in the room growing heavier. Father Francis confesses that he recognizes someone in the room and knows the reason they've been targeted by the kidnapper. However, he refuses to elaborate, claiming it goes against God's law and that he won't betray his sense of loyalty. The others turn against him, demanding answers. Feeling cornered, Father Francis finally admits that, facing death, he has nothing left to fear. Sully hesitantly steps forward to reveal his own shameful secret. 8 years earlier, consumed by rage and humiliation after being mocked in public by an old man who had lent him money, Sully retaliated in the most horrific way. He firebombed the man's store, intending only to destroy the property and hurt his pride. However, he tragically overlooked the fact that the man's young grandchildren were inside the building at the time, turning his act of revenge into a devastating tragedy. As the group absorbs this revelation, Jackson speaks up, his voice heavy with guilt. He recounts an incident from his first year on the police force, a moment that has haunted him ever since. Following a heated conflict with his partner, Jackson made a grave error during a case. In his frustration, he assaulted a young boy and manipulated the situation to force the boy into taking the blame for Jackson's mistake. It was a moment of weakness and anger that derailed an innocent life and stained Jackson's conscience. Each confession strips away another layer of their carefully constructed facades, exposing the dark deeds that have defined their pasts. The group, now more fractured than ever, begins to see a terrifying pattern, one that ties their crimes, betrayals, and victims into a single, horrifying tapestry of revenge. Eddie begins confessing his sins, admitting he once slept with a stripper while in college and was drunk at the time. Kelly and Jackson dismiss his confession as irrelevant. Jackson then suggests the situation might be related to a robbery, but Kelly immediately disagrees, insisting it's not. After much internal struggle, Father Francis speaks up, his voice weighed down with guilt. He reveals a crucial truth. Wade did not rob Chan's store. This revelation shakes the group, casting serious doubt on Kelly's earlier accusations. It also deepens the mystery, leaving everyone questioning how this false accusation fits into their collective predicament. Kelly, visibly defensive, insists that Wade was indeed guilty. She claims that Chan herself had identified Wade as the thief, trying to justify her actions. However, cracks begin to form in her story as the group scrutinizes the details. The pieces don't quite align, and suspicion shifts toward another possibility. Slowly, the group begins to speculate that the true thief was Christian, another figure connected to their tangled past. As the group debates, Jackson drops a shocking revelation that adds another twist to the puzzle. He discloses that Christian, the first victim executed by the kidnapper, had robbed Chan's store on the very day he was released from prison. Christian was desperate to repay a debt to Sully, a man known for his relentless pursuit of owed money. This new information further implicates Sully in the web of events that brought them all together. The timer once again reaches 0, signaling the kidnapper's return. His voice cuts through the tension as he identifies Sully as the root of their collective misfortune. Sully, unrepentant and defiant, lashes out, hurling insults at the masked figure and daring him to pull the trigger. The kidnapper calmly raises his gun, aiming it at Sully. For a moment, the room holds its breath, but instead of firing, the kidnapper lowers his weapon with an eerie calmness. He says, his words sending a chilling shiver through the room. Then, without hesitation, he turns his gun on Eddie. The group freezes in horror as the situation spirals into chaos. In a selfless act of sacrifice, Father Francis steps forward. As the gunshot rings out, he throws himself in front of Eddie, taking the fatal bullet. His lifeless body collapses to the floor, leaving the group in stunned silence. The kidnapper resets the timer and exits the room once more, leaving behind a haunting void where Father Francis's courage once stood. The remaining survivors are left to grapple with their grief, guilt, and the daunting task of solving the mystery before the timer reaches 0 again. Kelly becomes fixated on the idea that Wade is the kidnapper, her voice rising with conviction as she accuses him of orchestrating their nightmare. The masked figure, however, quickly denies her claim, his calm and measured tone adding an unsettling layer to his rebuttal. Jackson seizes the moment to redirect the focus back to Kelly, questioning her about Wade's time in prison. Kelly falters under the inspection, her earlier certainty now wavering. She struggles to recall the details, her memory clouded by time and perhaps guilt. Frustrated, she waves off Jackson's questions, insisting that delving into the past won't help them escape their current predicament. As the group wrestles with Kelly's dismissive attitude, Sully sinks into quiet reflection, his mind dredging up a memory that feels disturbingly relevant to their situation. He recalls a chilling connection between the group and their shared past. After Leon killed his brother, he sold the weapon to Christian, a transaction that seemed inconsequential at the time, but now looms large in Sully's mind. Building on this, Sully reveals another piece of the puzzle: that Christian had used that very same gun to rob Chan's store, the act that set off a cascade of events leading to their current captivity. The group listens in tense silence as Sully speaks, each revelation tightening the web of connections between them. It becomes increasingly clear that their fates are inextricably tied to one another, every action and decision from their past converging in this dark and twisted game. The tension in the room escalates as Kelly and Jackson's argument grows more heated, their voices rising in frustration. Kelly insists that her focus should be on escaping, while Jackson pushes for answers about the past, believing that their survival depends on uncovering the truth. As the timer hits 0 once more, the kidnapper re-enters, his presence instantly silencing the bickering. Without a word, he hands Nung Cham a note written in Chinese. She clutches it with trembling hands, but before anyone can question its contents, the kidnapper kills her. The group watches in horror as her lifeless body crumples to the floor, leaving the note's meaning a haunting mystery for the moment. Desperation takes hold of Kelly as she pleads for her life, her voice cracking with emotion. Through tears, she explains that she's a mother, and her son cannot survive without her. Her cries seem genuine, but the kidnapper's irritation is palpable. He lashes out, his voice sharp and accusatory, not to use her son as a shield. Turning his attention to Jackson, the kidnapper drops a bombshell revelation. Kelly's son is also Jackson's son. Jackson had no idea he had fathered a child, and this revelation strikes him like a physical blow, leaving him stunned. Kelly's sobs break the silence. Her defenses fall, and she confesses. She explains how everything fell apart after the theft, starting with Wade's arrest, which unleashed a chain of events that trapped everyone in a nightmare. At the time, Kelly's life was in shambles. She was losing cases, her career on the brink of collapse, and struggling as a single mother. Desperation drove her to irreversible decisions. Her confession exposes the cracks in her facade, revealing the guilt and vulnerability she had long hidden. Breaking down further, Kelly admits that she once manipulated Jackson, her lover, into tampering with evidence to wrongfully convict Wade. She kept this secret to avoid prison, but her confession leaves Jackson reeling from her betrayal. Meanwhile, Eddie begins to piece together a troubling theory. He recalls the kidnapper's intense reaction to Kelly, using her son as an excuse, and begins to suspect that Wade might have been the kidnapper's son. Just as Eddie starts to articulate his suspicions, the timer once again runs out. The kidnapper enters the room and kills Sully without hesitation, his cold efficiency further heightening the group's terror. Later, Kelly shares a haunting story from her past. She recounts how, one night, a man in a parking lot assaulted her, ripping her clothes and taking advantage of her. In a surge of fear and rage, she grabbed a baseball bat from his van and struck him repeatedly until he stopped moving. Ensuring no one saw or heard her, she returned home, cleaned herself up, and burned the bat to destroy any evidence. Eddie's mind races as he recalls a chilling detail Coogan once shared: his history of abusing children during his repeated imprisonments. A horrifying thought strikes Eddie. Coogan may have abused Wade during their time in prison. Eddie theorizes that the kidnapper, Wade's father, spent the last 2 years plotting revenge after losing his son, who survived only 2 years after his release on false charges. The timeline aligns with the father's motives, driven by grief and rage over Wade's death. Stepping forward, Eddie confesses his own guilt. As an employee of a pharmaceutical company producing expensive life-saving drugs, he recalls denying Wade's application for financial assistance without a second thought. Eddie admits his decision left Wade without treatment, likely worsening his suffering and contributing to his death. As the group connects the dots, they confront the kidnapper with their conclusions. They suggest their actions, whether direct or indirect, contributed to Wade's downfall and his father's torment. The kidnapper, shaken but steady, confirms their theory. Slowly, he removes his mask, revealing a face marked by grief and anger. The room falls silent, the weight of their shared guilt crushing them. Each survivor now understands that their actions, whether deliberate or careless, have left indelible scars on others, and those scars have come back to haunt them in the most horrific way. The kidnapper spares 3 individuals not directly involved in any crimes, releasing them with faces marked by relief and lingering guilt. Among them is Kelly, who sees a chance for freedom but with a sinister motive. Spotting a discarded gun, she grabs it, her desperation taking control, fires at the kidnapper. Jackson and Eddie beg her to stop, urging her to think of her child, but their pleas go unheard. Driven by paranoia and fear, Kelly begins firing wildly, her mind consumed by rage and desperation. But his bulletproof vest absorbs the shot, leaving him unharmed. He remains calm, unfazed by her unraveling state. Chaos erupts as bullets ricochet off walls, striking flesh and turning the room into a nightmare. Kelly's frenzied attack spares no one. Despite her assault, the kidnapper remains standing, using his final moments to reveal a chilling truth. Everything they confessed and all that has happened in the room has already been reported to the police. His words briefly paralyze Kelly, but panic overtakes her again, and she fires a final shot aimed at his head. Kelly, breathing heavily, discards the gun and stumbles toward the exit, her mind racing with thoughts of escape. She leaves behind the carnage she created, her desperation now her only companion. At the end, police officers arrive at the abandoned building. Their flashlights cut through the darkness as they carefully move through the halls, unaware of the horror ahead, while Kelly's frantic footsteps fade into the night. Subscribe for more videos like this, turn on notifications and leave a like to help the channel out. Thanks for watching.